it is such a pleasure to be in this club. I do remember when we first got this club off the ground, and it was really a work of love as much as anything else. So it's always good to be back, and I thank Jenny for having me come. We want to talk about being able to put a speech together in no time flat, so that we can get up with confidence. I often ask people, if you're asked to come and speak, and you didn't have a chance to prepare, do you feel more like a deer in the headlights? See, this is what we want to work on. Instead, we want you to be able to come up here, strong and proud, and be able to deliver a message, whatever that message is. There are several different recipes and ideas that we're going to go through to make this happen. And my goal for you is that by the time we're finished with this workshop, you'll each come that much closer to being able to feel that you can walk from the back of this room all the way to over here and deliver a powerful message or a speech. You're in the right place to work on some of the tools that you need to work on. Because in Toastmasters, we have a couple of different opportunities where we can learn to speak off the cuff and put something together. And we have a couple of guests. How many people have not been to a Toastmasters meeting before? Pay very close attention because you're going to hear some information here then. Somebody give me an example for those of you who are Toastmasters. Give me an example where you speak in a Toastmasters meeting and you're not necessarily coming up with a prepared speech.
Table topics.
Table topics. Absolutely. And what's another opportunity?
Evaluation.
Evaluations, exactly. So when we look at a lot of the things that we look at today, I want you to think to yourself, all right, I'm going to take as many opportunities as I can to do evaluations. And when someone asks me a question, even if I feel that it's a challenge, I'm going to get up and respond to that question in table topics because I am working on being able to present an impromptu speech. All right? I'll have a handout to give everyone at the end of this meeting too that you'll take with you that will go over a lot of the details that are important. Before we start, what I'd like to do is find out if there are particular objectives that everyone has walked in here with that they would like to know so that I make sure that by the end of this workshop we've covered those objectives. So let's see, does anybody have something that they came here that they said, I need to know? Juanita.
I can help other people saying this. How about a formula to make an interesting speech?
Yeah. I love formulas. They are so important. Has anybody tried to make a cake without a recipe? Right? Right? I mean, if you're a great baker, maybe, I don't know, but I'm a barber, not a baker. And the fact of the matter is that you have to have a recipe. You have to have a formula. So that's a very good, important note. Anything else?
So Rita, like I have a lot of topics in mind, but how do I bring in details and meet to that particular topic? So how do I go about doing that?
How do you go about doing what specifically then? Getting the details together?
So making into so I have a topic in mind. So most of the time we have a topic in mind, but how do we bring in, actually convert into a speech? So that means you need a lot more details to be put in, relevant details to be added to it. So how do I go about extracting and finding those things?
Okay. And in particular, extraction. Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
And specific need to talk over the phone with a group of the people. Sometimes the mediators probably say, oh, so-and-so, can you say something about something? And then I find out in the phone conversation you need a lot of filler words, otherwise in the blank it will feel very awkward. So I'd like to hear more about that.
So being able to fill in a portion of a teleconference? All right. Oops.
I'm a leader in my club, and I need to encourage people who have no time because they're working full-time, 80 hours plus a week, to step up and give speeches so our club gets its educationals done.
Okay.
So I'm looking for encouragement and tips that I can start using immediately to motivate people to do this. Who's giggling? No one else has this problem.
Not at all.
No.
Not at all.
I I've never heard of such a thing. Okay. Did I see another hand up? Yes.
The ability to negotiate, so during a review time, how to ask your boss for a raise.
That's very interesting. Okay.
That's a
Salary.
speech and salt.
Okay. All right.
How do you give a speech on a topic that you don't have any knowledge about,
Okay.
or you're not familiar with?
I have no info on. All righty. Yes.
Or similarly, take a speech that topic you do know something about and make it fit project objectives.
Okay. We'll get to that
That
towards,
is
yeah.
specific Toastmaster one.
Let's see, topic to project, right?
Right.
Okay? Anything else?
I have one. How to engage your audience.
Oh, okay. All right. On this one of the first things that I'm going to tell you, just kind of working a little bit backwards here, is that your audience always wants to see you succeed. If you begin with that premise, realizing that your audience wants to see you succeed, and we're not just talking about Toastmasters here, anywhere where you go do a speech or a presentation, they want you to succeed. If for no other reason, then they don't want to sit and listen to a lemon, right? So they're ready for you to impress them. The rest of the issue really comes down to this, and this is some of the very important stuff. Number one, when you start, I want you to think about this for the rest of your life, and anything that you do, when you speak to even one person or a bunch, never apologize. Never apologize. Don't come up if someone says, I'd like you to do a speech on rocket science, and come up and say, I don't really know anything about rocket science, I'm sorry. Don't do that. Don't apologize, because that lets everybody way down. In the course of your speaking, don't apologize. Don't say, I stuttered, I'm sorry. Don't do that. The audience barely will notice that. In fact, I spend a lot of time with Toastmasters International on the phone, and whenever I'm put on hold, they say that while you're on hold. Don't apologize for, your audience probably never noticed that. Yeah, that's not true. It's a very, very true thing, you know. So you want to remember that. And at the end can be a very crucial part for people when they're doing a presentation. At the end, a lot of times, people will feel like, I'm letting the audience down. I forgot my big line. Whatever it is, do not apologize. So there are little bits here that I want you to take with you for the rest of your life. Number one is, do not apologize. So we got that one, right?
Yeah.
The next thing is you want to think to yourself, even if I were to say, David, I want you to come and speak on rocket science, is that, don't do it yet, is that I want you to think in terms of begin with the end in mind. Whenever you have to speak off the cuff and in an impromptu fashion, as you're walking up, as you're gathering your thoughts, say to yourself, what's the message I want to leave? What's the impact? What's the impact? It's a very, very important portion of the whole thing, because as you're walking up, if you think about that, it will help you create the framework for what you're going to speak about with your audience. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's very important too is that as you're walking up, and this is easier said than done, but it comes with practice, don't walk up thinking to yourself, oh my God, this is going to be, I'm going to forget everything. Don't do that. Walk up and remember that first thing that I shared with you. What was the first thing that I shared with you?
Audience wants you to succeed.
The audience wants you to succeed. The audience wants you to succeed. So walk up and say, you know what? I'm going to be confident. I am not the deer in the headlights. I'm going to be confident. I'm going to come up and I'm going to share what I have to say, because I know every single person in this room wants me to succeed. And another important point too, for those people that feel like, oh, there's too many people in here that I need to speak to, just remember you're only speaking to one person at a time. It doesn't matter how many people are in the room. You're only speaking to one person at a time. And if you remember that, that also helps you a great deal in terms of helping you eliminate the heebie-jeebies, so to speak. Now, you do need to format your speech, and recipes are important. And so that idea here of having a formula is very important. And there are various formulas that work for various people. Does anybody here have a formula that they use? What's your formula, David?
My formula is first line, something to grab, 3 points, which I may then descend into if time permits, and each of those times I try to do it with 3 points, and a last line that's going to get me off the stage gracefully and often with a laugh.
Okay, good. So here's the thing. There are different formulas that work for different people. And so for David, he needs to hang on to that formula, and he needs to use that. Everybody has a different formula. I think in terms of a painting. That's how I always think. I always think to myself, what is the painting? Yes.
Yes.
Come on in. Grab a seat. I think in terms of a picture, a piece of art, and I think of the frame around the art. And the frame, the top part of the frame needs to match the bottom part. So I start off with that opening line, and then go into the body, which is the art itself. And then the closing line is the bottom of the frame. And I know that the bottom of the frame needs to look as good, but preferably better than the top part of the frame. Has anybody ever gone to a concert, a musical concert? Mm-hmm. What do you notice that they do at concerts? Opening act? Okay, what's the opening?
A smaller group.
All right. Oh, I see what you're meaning by opening act. I see. All right. Let's say you're talking about Mariah Carey. And she's up there and she's starting to do her concert. What's her opening song going to be? Is it going to be her most popular song?
No.
What's it going to be, Juanita?
New song.
It's
Her
gonna be-
latest a new song, the hit.
It could be a new song. It could be a hit. And what's her last song going to be?
Everybody knows about it.
Everybody knows about it. It's the number one thing.
Yeah.
When you're doing an impromptu speech, you want to think the same way too. You want to think to yourself, as you're saying, begin with the end in mind. What's that line that's going to take it home for me? And that's important to do for a lot of reasons. It's important to do because, for one thing, people will remember your closing line. And in this society, where a lot of people do not have a long attention span because they're on cell phones or other things like that, they will remember what your last line is. They will remember it. And if your last line is memorable, they're going to remember you in a positive way. So you want to think about it that way. There's a wonderful formula that I want to share with you that's called PREP, which is point. You make your point at the opening of your speech, all right? Then you have the reason for your point. So reason is the next part. P for point, R for reason. Then the next thing that you have is you have an example that you can share that made that reason so. And then the last part is your point, your close. It's a frame again. That's a great recipe or formula to use if you're just starting to think, how do I do this? I suggest you do that. Now, as time goes by, the more that you practice, and you can't practice enough, the more that you practice, the more that you'll say, oh, you know, I'm going to take this prep thing, and I'm going to add something else to it. And that's perfectly fine to do. Make it your own, all right? That's one thing that I think is very important. People need to be true to who they are and what their style is. As an example, I know this great speaker who always starts off by sharing a story. That's the way he starts. He says, I was so-and-so, and this was going on, and then he shares a story, and then he gets into his point. There are a lot of people that do that. I admire and love that, but I'm not very good at it. It really doesn't work for what my personality type is. My personality type is I want to find out what other people are thinking first. And then I write down what other people are thinking, and then we talk about whatever it is that we want to talk about. And then this is, by the way, where Toastmasters has been such a wonderful blessing in my life, because I have to stretch myself all the time, because most of the time I don't have the luxury to say, what do you want to learn today? I have to come up here and just say it, right? So it's a good exercise for me to do that. Now, David shared that he could walk from there to here and do a speech. And I have no doubt. I mean, he's very capable and he's quick on the fly. There's no question about it. What you want to think about is, what do I do if I have to share, do a speech, and it's on rocket science, and I don't happen to know anything about rocket science? How do you do that? What do you do if someone says, I need you to do a speech on XYZ, and you're not familiar? Does anybody have any ideas? Elaine?
So I've never done it myself, but I've heard about this particular competitive speech environment. It's called NFL, National Forensics League, and perhaps you've heard of it from high school. And they do an impromptu speaking, and they prep very thoroughly on a subject, and they know it inside and out. And then they get this question that's out of the blue, like this, come on up and tell us why the sky is blue. And then they come up and they have to link that question to what they know. So they actually evolve that question along until they're speaking with confidence about what they know. So perhaps something similar to that would work
Absolutely.
in this example.
Has anyone who's been in Toastmasters, has anyone been asked a question in Toastmasters at table topics for which they had no idea what the response was? Anybody, has that ever happened to anyone?
Yeah.
And what do you do? I mean, if you're a Toastmaster member, guests don't have to do this, but once you become a Toastmaster member, we want you to learn and grow, right? And so part of how we have you learn and grow is to learn how to speak impromptu, off the cuff, for at least 1 to maybe 2 minutes. So what if I said, Juanita, what do you think about rocket science? And Juanita's kind of like, rocket science? I want to talk about finance. What is the matter with this person? As she's walking up, what could Juanita do?
You know, usually I come in as a humorous speech at the beginning to make people knowing that rocket science is not easy. And here I am trying to learn something, to try to share something that everybody can come with. But then I go through the actual science of what rocket science is, and kind of gather all my knowledge from everywhere, and I try to ask and interact with my audience. I get audience to participate, so that I start to play with it. So nobody knows I did not know anything about it. And the audience is really good at it. They want to show off. Then I gather, say, oh, I agree with you. But somehow, as something, I will kind of twist a little bit. That's my formula. So I can expand the idea and pass on to other people. Does anybody have objection? It becomes debate. And that becomes a rocket science that people enjoy, become a story for everyone. And then I want to wrap it out and just gather everybody's conclusions. So therefore, rocket science is this. I hope you guys enjoy it. And I got it.
That's very sneaky and good. I like that.
I don't do this for any technical speaking.
So you become a judge.
Take what Juanita said about finance. She wants to talk about finance. When you open rocket science. Everybody talks about rocket science being difficult. We're in April. It's tax season. Which would you rather do? Rocket science where you can send it off, or taxes when you just don't know if it's going to work? Let's talk about money.
Oh my gosh, what a great transition. That is such a great transition. And think that way. Always think to yourself, just calm yourself down when you're asked on a subject that you know nothing about, and say, what do I know about that would work? And think about that transition. Do not mention rocket science, as David pointed out, but bring out that different parallel universe that you want to share instead. Instead, do exactly as he did, and talk about that. And then, how would you end that, David? If you're going to go through that whole thing, and by the way, this is not table topics now, I'm having you do 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay.
How are you going to close?
At the close, we've been talking about money. Rockets, NASA had a big budget. They've had to learn how to do with less in our current era. They've had to learn to do rocket science on the cheap. In your life, you may not be doing rocket science every day, but if you can do something and spend a little less on it, is it going to make a difference in what you can accomplish? I think so. Mr. Toastmaster.
There you go. There you go. And I love the good, strong ending. That's very, very good. I think so. That's very, very good. Yes. That's one way of then being able to take yourself from a subject you know nothing about and then switching it into something that you do know about, but still making some kind of a comparison that people can relate to. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for a job interview.
Because they know you're part.
In a job interview, what I would probably just say is, I'm not that familiar with rocket science. Can you tell me what you mean? That's what I would probably do in that particular case. But when you're asked to come up and do a speech, it's a different sort of thing, most definitely. And really what people are looking for is that they're looking for information. Another great way of doing it, and this is the thing that I love to do, is I love to think of myself as being a reporter who's going to report information. So I like to think about who, what, when, where, how, why. I think in those terms very quickly, so that I think to myself, what can I share with someone to give them the basics of what's happening so that they can take that information and run with it. There are many, many different methods of doing it. You need to find one that works for you. There's only one way to do it, by the way. I have to share this story. My husband, who works in high tech, is so challenged with a computer. It's unbelievable. I hear him so often in his office saying, and I'll walk in, I'll say, what's up, honey? And he'll say, it won't let me. He says this all the time about his computer. It won't let me. And I always think to myself, who is this computer? You know, what is this computer doing? I, on the other hand, I have my issues with other things, but I, on the other hand, I have this great relationship with my computer. Even when it crashed and died, the hard drive just completely died, I still have a good relationship with my computer. Because I just always say to my computer, all right, you and me, we're here together. We're doing this together. We're working together here. It's all good. And I experiment all the time. Instead of looking for the perfect formula or the perfect solution, I say to myself, let me just experiment and see what works and see what goes wrong. And I figure it out from there. I just started using Microsoft Office in the cloud, and this has been a different situation for me. And I just say to myself, all right, factor in that time, just experiment with it. The point is, you can either sit there and say, I need to have a formula that's given to me. You can feel that you're a victim and you can't come and do an impromptu speech, or you can say, let me play with this. Let me play around with this and see what's going to work. This formula might work great for so-and-so. This is the formula for me. And you won't know unless you try. You might get something today that you say, this is the way I'm going to do it. I know, by gosh, this is going to be the way that's going to work for me. Don't necessarily buy into that until you've tried it and you allow yourself the ability to tweak with it. All right? Now, one of the reasons why I brought up in the very beginning that you have to begin with the end in mind is because one thing that I see people do quite often is when they have to do an impromptu speech, you don't really know where you're left at the end, right? There was this cartoon that said something to the effect of, if you don't know where you're going, you'll probably never get there. And I'm sure it's a famous line from somewhere else too. But when you come up, you need to think to yourself, with beginning with the end in mind, where do I want to go? And where am I taking my audience with me? Your audience should come along with you. There's some chairs back over there. Okay, cool. Think about that. Think about how you want to present that to other people in terms of what's the journey that we're taking and how are we going to get there. All right. Any questions so far? Anybody ready for a small exercise? All right. I'm going to give you a subject, and I'm going to ask you to come and do just 1 minute, not a full big speech, but just 1 minute of sharing on that subject. How many people want to play? All right. What is your name?
Sudan.
Sudan?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. And you don't know that I'm going to call on you, by the way. You have no idea. The subject is springtime. Sudan.
Springtime brings a lot of memories in me. I've had a lot of good times and memorable times. The recent one that I want to share with you is travel that I did to Mount Shasta. It was a really great experience for me. One, because I like to travel, and two, because I travel with my wife, and she handles all the other logistics stuff, and I can just relax and look at the beautiful scenic views outside. So I had a great time with my friends, and it was one of the most beautiful times that I spent spring here in the United States, and I would cherish that memory for a long time.
All right, thank you. Do you mind? Tell me exactly what was going on in your mind as you were coming up here to share.
Like you mentioned, I wanted to just say one thing to the audience that is the message that I want to leave them, and I was just thinking about that, and as I was talking, I sort of framed it up, and I just wanted to finish it up in a minute, not to drag it along.
Very good. All right, did everybody get a message? Yeah? Good. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. I got a message too. One of the things that's very important to use when you have to do an impromptu speech, and this is just, to me, the pot of gold, is to take an honest inventory of the thing that you think you need to do better ahead of time. As an example, I'll use myself. I have a tendency to speak way too fast, way too fast. And this has been a big problem my whole life. And you know what? When I am nervous, like a person could be when they're doing an impromptu speech, I sound like Minnie Mouse. I do. And I speak so fast that nobody can get anything that I'm saying. So one of the things that I work on all the time, if I have to come up and I have to do an impromptu speech, is I think to myself that there is music between the notes. Being silent, pausing when I speak, is not only good for my audience, because they can then reflect on what is being said, but it's good for me. It keeps me centered and grounded and thinking about the next thing that I need to share. Everybody has something. We all do. There's no perfect anybody out there. Think about what it is for you. If someone is a person who uses filler words, think to yourself, I'll just bite my tongue and not use that filler word, whatever that filler word is, and just be quiet and silent. I think pausing is the biggest issue for many people too. All right? Now I want you to take that idea where I was talking about making your initial point, okay, and having a formula where you put a body of the point there and then closing with that point too. And I'd love to get a response to this question. And this is a question that I think we can all relate to. What is the best thing a person can do in the summertime? Do you want to give it a go?
So when I think of summertime, I think what would be the best thing to do? And I think nothing, absolutely nothing is the best thing to do. Well, what I mean by that is that we're so busy in our lives. And you think about this, in the United States, we have the least amount of vacation time in the world. So isn't summer the best time to take off? Maybe 6 weeks or 8 weeks to do absolutely nothing? When's the last time you sat there and did absolutely nothing? I mean, not look at your screens, not watch TV, not just do nothing. So I'd like to suggest that for the summer, you take the opportunity to do absolutely nothing.
Nice. Future Toastmaster. How was that for you?
It was good. I liked I tried to use your prep, and when you said, hey, you know, what's the best thing to do summer? I'm like, nothing. And you're like, okay, go talk. I'm like, all right, I'm going to talk about nothing.
Yeah, and you did it in a way where everybody thought, yeah, a little bit of nothing is not such a bad thing, right?
Great.
Nothing's great, and you had a good ending too, which I really liked. That was very, very good. There was a question over here about what do you do when you're on a teleconference and you're asked to fill in the blank. That was your question? First off the bat, if you're put in a situation like that, and whenever you're put in a situation where you have to be part of a dialogue rather than doing your own speech, and in this case you're being part of a dialogue, someone else has said something, other things have been said, and they want you to fill in this chunk of time. One of the first things I would suggest is find a good, efficient way to take great notes, all right? And what I normally do if I'm in a situation like that is I'll take a piece of paper, not this one, and I'll divide it in the middle, and when I hear someone saying some stuff that is important, it might be something that I might be asked to comment on, I go ahead and I write it here, and then I write down what I would say about it, all right? And then I do it with the next thing over here, and then what I would say about it, et cetera, et cetera. So, and that has happened to me so often. In fact, I feel like I was born with a star over my head, where I'm always put in that position where someone they'll have a whole discussion, and they'll say, Rita, what do you think about that? And it's kind of like, oh my. So I've learned how to do this to save myself. And then I can say, well, I noticed that Jim said, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I'd also like to add that such and such and such is a very good thing too. So what you're doing is you're reiterating what you heard so that it doesn't end up becoming something that's completely out of context to the other people that are listening. They're not going to know where you're coming from. But it gives you solid material that you can share. And if it is on a teleconference, best of all, you've got your notes right there. All right? On the flip side, if you're doing an impromptu speech, I highly encourage you not to have notes at all. The most I would suggest is maybe a bullet card, but how do you have a bullet card if you're speaking at the last minute, right? There comes a point where you need to know that you have to trust in yourself, and you have to trust in your audience that you don't really need the notes. I was working with a gentleman recently, and he had a script, basically, for this presentation that he was going to do. And I was watching him let his script bring him down. It was really bad for him. He wasn't really himself, and I didn't even really know him, but I could see he wasn't himself. And so I said, okay, so let's have you do it again. And then he brings this thing over here. And I said, except, let me have this. And when I said that, he said, oh, you're one of those people. And I said, yeah, I am. Because we want to see people do their absolute best. I want to see people do their absolute best. When he didn't have it there, for the first couple of minutes, he stumbled a little bit because he had already allowed his notes to become a crutch. But once he realized that he couldn't use those notes any longer, it stopped being a crutch for him, and then he spoke from his heart and his mind, instead of from some papers that he wrote X many days ago that really weren't very good. So wherever possible, when you're coming up to do a speech, don't have notes. The teleconference thing is something entirely different, so that you're not caught off guard. But when you come up here, just speak from your heart and tell it like it is. The same thing is true, by the way, with PowerPoints. Do not rely on your PowerPoint to speak for you. Your PowerPoint should be underscoring whatever your message is. And you should be able to have that PowerPoint up there with barely ever paying any attention to it, because it's giving you the information that you need. Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions so far? All right. I'm going to look at some of the things that we want to cover here to make sure that we cover it, because time flies fast when you're having fun. Motivate others to do an off-the-cuff speech. We were laughing about this a little bit just for our non-Toastmaster friends here, because it's ironic. People join Toastmasters so that they can become better communicators and work on their leadership skills, but then they say, well, I don't have time to work on a speech. And it's easy to forget. Life gets in the way and everything. And some people feel like they need way too much time to prepare. But if you let someone know, like possibly when you take this handout today, hey, why don't you try the prep model? And why don't you just see what happens? And you remind people that this is a learning lab. All Toastmaster clubs and all of Toastmaster is a learning lab. This is the safe place to try things you wouldn't do anywhere else, all right? When you remind them of that kind of stuff, it helps them. And then there's a little extra something that you can do if you have the bandwidth, and I'm not saying you have to do it, but if you have the bandwidth, is let's say as an example that I said, Juanita, I need you to be a speaker on Friday. You haven't spoken in a while, I'd like you to do a speech. And this is on Thursday, the Thursday before that I tell you this. So you have, in other words, a week and a day to prepare. And then Juanita at first says, yeah, okay, sure. And then I don't hear from her and nothing. What I would do is on Monday or Tuesday before that Friday, Juanita, how's the speech coming along? Need any help? People need to know, number one, that you're there to support them. And people also need to know, number two, that they are accountable. One thing I feel very strongly about is we're all grown-ups in Toastmasters for a reason. And we're all here to learn. It's just that some of us need to be reminded that we want to learn. And so sometimes if that needs to happen, remind them and be there for them. Does that make sense? The other thing too is if you don't have one already, have a strong peer mentoring program. That can help you an awful lot too, right? Let's see, the formula. Okay, so we talked about, the formula to me is key, by the way. Whatever your formula is, like I said, you can't make a cake without a recipe. So figure out what your own personal formula is, try a bunch of different ones, and once you have that formula, I tell you what, it makes all the difference in the world, all right? But none of it, by the way, works if you don't try it. So just be sure that you try it. Turn topics into a speech. Who said that?
That was me, sorry.
All right. Okay. So let's say topic into a speech. So we were talking about rocket science earlier. Is that what we're talking about?
Right. So what I was looking for is like rocket science is the topic that I want to talk about, but what are the details that I bring in? Like, some of the people talked about like, how they attach to the April and whatnot, right? How do I link those ideas and, make it into a speech? That is what I was looking for.
The first thing you have to know is your audience before you do it. If your audience, let's say, for rocket science is a bunch of scientists and you really are into rocket science, then you might speak at a level up here and you may go into a lot more details. If your audience are people like me, who knows practically nothing about rocket science, then you want to speak a little more here and you want to just cover some basics. Don't give them too much information, and if you're going to err on the side of less information than too much information. Just think about some basics, all right? You need to have, whatever, chemicals that come together, whatever the different parts are for rocket science. Just say, I'm going to give them 3 takeaways about rocket science today that they'll know. We have a tendency to want to give people a lot of information, especially when it's a subject that we're very enthusiastic about. We need to curb that enthusiasm. And we need to do something instead where we just say, I'm going to give them less, and hopefully if I give them less, they're going to say, I want to know more. And then they'll come to us to want to know more information. All right?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, topics in speech extraction. That was the other part of the word. Okay, that was the whole, sorry about that. I can't write worth a hoot. Fill in a portion of a teleconference. We talked about that. Negotiate salary. I'll consider your best offer. Number 1 line you should know in your life. Really. I'll consider your best offer. Because really, he who speaks money first loses. This is the basic rule. And I don't even know how we got that. but this is something that's very important. If you say, well, I'm looking for $100,000 a year, guess how much money you're going to get? Or maybe not at all. Right?
Yeah.
If someone's going to offer you $110,000, but you said $100,000, guess what? They're going to offer you $100,000. Why not? It's $10,000, right? If someone's going to offer you $90,000, but you said $100,000, they may not offer you the job at all because they can't afford to take you on. All right? But when you say, I'll consider your best offer, you've taken the monkey off of your back, and you've put it on someone else's back so that they have to talk money. So that's why there's that line, he who speaks money first loses, and it's a very important one. All right, let's see. A topic I have no info on. Do we feel comfortable that we covered that fairly well? Yeah? Any questions about that? Okay. Let's see. Topic to project. Topic to project. Oh, topic to project.
Maybe fitting one that doesn't fit.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Everything fits in the Competent Communicator Manual. Everything does. So I always suggest that you always have a Competent Communicator Manual going on at all times, which you do, just in case it doesn't fit. But you would be surprised how many things do fit. There's always an opportunity. As an example, I need you to give me an evaluation, as a matter of fact. I was thinking I need to have this one where you introduce a person for this particular thing. It's introduce the speaker in this project here. And I was thinking, where am I going to do that? How am I going to do that? When's it going to happen? And then Jenny said, hey, can you come and be a Toastmaster and we'll do this videotaping thing and everything? So I did that, so now she can evaluate me. See, so it works out. You have to think outside of the box often, and you have to think to yourself, how would this apply? But there are going to be some instances where it doesn't work, and be okay with that, and just let it go, right? That's what you've got your CC for. I'm working on my 6 CC right now, because that's always my fill in the blanks thing, and it's a good, I love the CC, it's so good. All right? Let's see, how to engage your audience. How do you engage your audience? If your audience cannot respond to you, how do you engage your audience?
Ask questions.
If your audience cannot respond to those questions, how can you engage your audience? That's a good one if you're having a workshop like this. But if your audience cannot respond to you, they're just going to sit there. How can I engage a person?
I have a friend who likes to make jokes to kind of make them feel comfortable.
Jokes are good. Humor is always very good. Yep, definitely. What else? Elaine?
So I disagree a little bit. I have a different point of view about the questions. There's many speeches I give where it's a rhetorical question, or it's a question, it's a you-focused question that always brings the audience in. How would you? Have you ever? Things like that at the beginning, and that they relate to that feeling or that emotion, and that will bring them in.
Yes, a rhetorical question, I completely agree. That kind of thing. That is a good one for sure. I'm thinking about what can you do? There's something that we can do that we often don't use enough that will bring your audience completely in and will engage them entirely. What would that thing be?
Somebody with eye contact.
Bam! That's the number one thing.
What else?
That is the big thing. When people feel like you're really speaking to them, instead of doing the grazing thing, right? Where you just really take a moment and you speak to somebody directly, you take a moment to really make that connection. It makes a person feel like, oh, I'm a part of what's going on. And for some people it's difficult. For some people it's easier. The minute that I finally got that theory into my brain, that you really are only speaking to one person at a time, it became super easy for me. Because I do want to speak to one person at a time. That works with my sensibilities, right? And it also becomes a wonderful way of engaging your audience, having your audience want to be a part of what's going on. Another thing that's great to do too is to just, the rhetorical question is good, and then also ask at a certain point besides a rhetorical question, does everybody understand what I mean at the finish, at the very end of it? So that they have the sense of, yeah, okay, so she's really listening to me, or he's really talking to me, or whatever it is. All right? Let's see. That's basically all that information. Any questions? Elaine?
Can I add something you just touched on so well? So asking the question, making everyone feel like they're a part of it. There's a specific way to ask a question where you're asking one person instead of the whole room. This is something Patricia Fripp teaches. She's an executive speaker coach. Instead of saying, how many of you have been to Baltimore? You say, have you been to Baltimore? Because that way it's as if I asked one person at a time instead of the whole room. And that's a subtle tip that makes a stronger connection between the speakers.
It's a good one.
One follow-up question.
Okay.
I like the eye contact. My name's Jimmy. I'm new here, so.
Welcome.
Hello. When you met the suggestion of eye contact, just any random person, or is there a particular person that would be a good person to, you feel that will reciprocate?
I usually can, if someone looks, I look at someone and they look away from me right away, I feel like I might be making that person feel uncomfortable, and that is never my intention. So I generally will not seek that person out and do eye contact with them again. If I'm speaking to someone and I can feel like they are looking at me and we are having a rapport, I will look at that person and I will come back to that person again. That's how I figure it out. Then also, I don't think it's good practice to start here and then change here and then change here throughout your sentence. Try and stick with one full sentence at a bare minimum with one person. And then when you go to the next sentence, then look at another person, something along that lines, rather than breaking it up too much. Does that make sense? Yeah, and I must say too, there's a flip side, Elaine, that practice of Patricia Fripp, there's a flip side to it that I just encountered last week. I was doing a speech. In fact, oddly enough, I was doing project 1 of this manual. And do you want to know what project 1 of this manual is, specialty speeches? It's impromptu speaking. You get 5 subjects, you take 5 subjects, you put them in 5 envelopes, and you give them to the Toastmaster, and the Toastmaster picks one. And I'm just going to be very frank about it. One of the reasons why I picked doing this is because I just thought to myself, I didn't even know I was going to be speaking. And I thought to myself, well, I got to do something here. And I came up with 5. The 5th one that I picked was the subject that was just let me throw something in there, I need 5. Don't you know that's the one I got? Murphy's Law, that's the one that I got, right? And I was thinking to myself, oh, heck. And when I went up there, at a certain point, I said something like, have you ever been to Baltimore? And then I went on to something else, and I got nailed for it. In my evaluation, the person came up and said, I find it extremely unsatisfying to have you ask a question and not let that person fully respond to you. And I thought, okie dokie. Just food for thought. And this brings up a very good point. There's really no one set recipe, all right? Once you learn the basics, you can start adding or taking away things. You can, if it's a cake recipe, you can stop using vanilla extract and use almond extract instead. You can change things around to make them work for you in a better way. Did I see your hand go up? I saw your hand go up.
One other trick that Patricia has talked about is just to handle that, don't ask the question if you don't want the answer, is she makes it even more indirect. If I were to ask you, have you been to Baltimore? What would you think? Would you think about that? And then go on from there. So you're not even really asking the question.
That's a
You're
good one.
still getting it out there.
I think I'm going to try that. Yeah, that's
At
good.
least you get that evaluator again.
Yeah. That was rough.
But can I?
Yeah, okay.
But that's another thing too. If you ask a question, you have to let them answer in their mind.
Right.
Yes.
Otherwise, they get up. That's what I thought your evaluator was upset about. Not that you asked the question, but that you didn't let them answer it in their mind before you went on. And it's as if you were saying, Rita, have you ever been to Baltimore? And then oh, you know, it's very rude to just ignore your answer and move on without letting you answer, right?
Yeah.
So that's how it feels.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. That's not what she was doing me on, though.
Oh.
So it was a whole different
Curious.
thing. And she's a really good evaluator, too. So it's someone who, when she said that, I mean, people want her to evaluate you, right? I want her to evaluate me now. So when she said that, it was kind of like, whew, growing opportunity. Yeah, amazing.
Growing pain.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? All right. I have, bless you, I have some handouts here. It's just a basic one-sheet handout that goes over the different points that we talked about today and gives you some extra information that you can use. Here's the thing, though. Seriously speaking, we can go to workshops and classes for forever and a day, and there's just so many great ones that are going on. If you don't take the information and use the information, it is for naught. It is. And again, you're in Toastmasters. This is the environment to try everything out and to give it a shot. And then if it doesn't work here, don't look at it as a failure. Look at it as a growing opportunity, a way to learn how to do something better. Be your own Thomas Edison, who once said that he never had any failures, only growing opportunities. Make the same true for yourself. Take these things, use them, and personally, I will tell you, I absolutely love it when I give information to people, and then sometime or another they'll say, hey Rita, they'll email me or call me, I tried this. This was really, really great. I also like, not love, I also like it when someone says, you know that piece of information you gave? I didn't like that at all. Because it is my own learning opportunity, and I'm on a learning quest as well as everybody else in this room. So please do let me know that. I have these handouts right here. If you don't get a handout, that's okay. You can email me and I'll send you a soft copy. So any other questions? Is that it? How many people are going to try what we did today to do it? No, I don't want that. Come on, raise your hand. All right. Yeah, I want to see your hand too. Yeah? Okay, all right. All right, it's been a pleasure. I'm going to turn everything back over to Jenny at this time.
feel more confident. I can just speak to as if I'm talking to one person. Our meeting starts in a formal Toastmaster meeting, starts just in several minutes.